Hello, hello everybody. My name is Zahid or Zahid. I recently completed my PhD in politics here in the UK from the University of York. My thesis was on the post 9/11 violence, and I looked at the link between political order or disorder and violent extremism in the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan. So today, I'm going to present the topic post-colonial governmentality in FATA, that is federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, and analysis of the links between political disorder and terrorism after 9/11. As we know that the tribal areas of Pakistan that became a focus of international attention after 9/11, not for good reasons. Obviously, it was President Obama termed it as the most dangerous place in the world, and it was also referred to as the frontier of apocalypse, or the Badlands of Pakistan, and Peter Bergen called it Talibanistan. That means the land of the Taliban. So for all these, and it was also called as an ungoverned space, or it is an autonomously governed or semi-autonomously governed area, or a place where there is authority vacuum. So related to this thing, this authority vacuum is that it is governed by a code that is Pashtun Wali, and that is Pashtun Code of Life. That's why, and that is opposed to any centralized control, and that is historically like that. So, and it is called what called by Scott, because they want to evade the state. So that's why it is autonomously. But in this paper, I would problematize that notion that Pashtun Wali was responsible for state, the state out tribal areas. No, the state was very much there, and you would see it was not only there, it was only historically the state had a kind of presence since the Mughals time, the Mughal Empire time. So I'm coming to that point shortly. So FATA, or the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, is a mountainous area of 27,220 square kilometers between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And historically, it is considered to be a gateway to India, because all the 5 major invasions that came from the north through the tribal areas of Pakistan. So that's why, and it was comprised of tribal agencies. Tribal agencies are like tribal districts. So before May 2018, they were called tribal agencies, and now they are called tribal districts. So there are different agencies: Bajawad Agency, Mumand Agency, Khyber Agency, Orakzai, Kuram, North and South Waziristan. Besides these, there are 6 frontier regions related to area: Peshawar, frontier region Kohat, Banno, frontier region Lucky, frontier region Yekan, and Tak. So that is, and according to the recent census, its population is 5.5 million. So after this brief introduction, let me sketch out the evolution of the system of governmentality or system of administration in the tribal areas of Pakistan from Mughal time through the British Empire to the state of Pakistan. It is said that in the Mughal time, the Mughal Empire time, that is roughly from 1526 until 1857, but there were ups and downs in between. So during the Mughals' time, the frontier, the lawlessness or trouble on the frontier was considered to be to ensure peace in the mainland, or what Manan Ahmad Asif calls that to the center of an empire, the frontier is a site of anxiety, of potential harm, and of barbarians who could be marching towards the gate. So that is how it was. So it has, the Mughal Empire did not have full presence, but it had pockets of presence in different areas, and they were to administer it through middlemen, through tribal elders. And is the Mughal Empire that was given tough time by the tribal, by the Pashtuns of the tribal areas. So the Mughal, they called them plundering tribes, irregular in paying taxes, or tumult-raising Afghans, outwardly obedient but inwardly delighted in disorder. So as this was the understanding of the tribal Pashtuns, or the Pashtuns at large, so the Mughal Empire, the Mughal state, they came up with ruthless activities, military operations, and in one case, Babur writes that they erected piles of heads of the slaughtered Pashtuns. So it was the ruthlessness was to the point that now, when in Pashtun society, when you refer to something as Mughal, that means barbarity, that is calamity. So that is how it is. The interaction was that way. So as the system of, as this was the understanding that they are and are irregular in paying taxes, so the only administration that they thought that could be done, put in place, is indirect system of administration through tribal elders. So so that was in line with the overall British Empire, because the British Empire was a bureaucratic patrimonial empire. So that was, wherever its reach was strong, it was ruling directly, and where it was not, then it opted for indirect system of administration. So that was inherited by the British Empire. So what British Empire so they did was that they converted this bureaucratic patrimonial empire into bureaucratic authoritarian empire. So system of administration in the tribal areas. That was, Ian Talbot has rightly pointed out that they put in place a security state arrangement in the Northwest Frontier area, as it was called, in the Northwest Frontier province and the tribal areas. That was that the security was took precedence over all other system or representative form of governance or anything. They just wanted to manage and control the people rather than to govern them, because governing them was costly, and they wanted to include the areas, but only to the point of excluding the reach of the Afghan states, as Ullah has convincingly argued. So that was, I think, and so that was what they did was that and the system of administration was again indirect in the tribal areas, and in separate districts it was direct. But the labeling or characterization of the tribal areas of the tribal Pashtun, that remained almost the same, and they were called noble savages, and they were backward. They were they were robbers, and they had no sense of they had no sense of faith. They had no faith and no sense of honor. This is called the Elphinstonian episteme, called by Benjamin Hopkins, and that's true because he visited Peshawar in 1808, and then he came up with all these things that they have no sense of honor, and so that persisted along the line as long as the British Empire was there. So what they Charles Lindholm argues that this characterization that changed that was changing from policy to policy. When it was the direct administration, the forward policy, it was called forward policy, so they wanted to directly administer. The Pashtuns were treacherous and greedy. Forward policy was that, Kabul, the British Empire, the frontier should be between Kabul and Herat, and that should be the east of that should be under the British control. So for those, the agents of direct administration, they were treacherous and greedy. For British soldiers, they were savage but honorable warriors. And for the agents of the indirect administration, they were loyal and gentlemanly. So this understanding of the Pashtuns, treacherous and savage. So what this understanding led to kind of administration was what is called black law. That is Frontier Crimes Regulation, 1872. Then it was modified in 1887, and then again in 1901. That was in place until May 2018. So as the indirect administrators, they wanted, it was a close border policy and forward policy. So that was the indirect administration was considered to be more appropriate, and that was that the rewaj or customs of the people would be incorporated into the system, into the regulation, the frontier crime regulation, and then that could be the tribal areas could be ruled through that regulation. What happened was that this was based on the frontier crime regulation that's called black law. That was based on the understanding that what William K. said, that we cannot train wild horses with the silken braids. That means that stringent measures were needed to control the unruly tribesmen, as that was going on from the Mughal Empire, and they always opposed centralized control. As the British Empire was bureaucratic authoritarian, it was an ethnographic state. It collected data and it had to hierarchize the area and then had to implement a system of administration. So what they did was, first they had to divide the area in each tribal agencies into three things: the inaccessible area, which was controlled by the people, and it was having nominal control of the states. Then there was administered areas, that was public property to be protected by the political agent with scouts people, that was to influence, and levies and Hasadar force. And then there was that was administered area. Then there was protected area. Protected area was to be where the tribal elders, they were to handle both criminal and civil cases as per rivaj or customs, but political agent could use its authority if he deemed that anything was what was going on there was against the state. So what the point is, that there was a state presence, whether it was through political agent, through the people. It was a bit more stringent because people were responsible for the law and order situation in their areas. Now I am coming to the salient features of the frontier crime regulation. Then you would see how the system was working. So the frontier crime regulations, it is a document, not very lengthy, but I am going to share just a few salient features. There was a collective responsibility clause that under section 21 and 22, these are related to collective responsibility, that if one person of a tribe commits something bad or criminal, then the whole tribe could be punished. That was essentially the argument. And then there was territorial responsibility, that if an area that is a territory that is under the territorial jurisdiction of a tribe, that a tribe was to be responsible for its own territory. If something happened on that, then the whole tribe could be punished as well. Then there was that no construction could be allowed under Section 31, and if there was the government or the state thought that there was any danger, they could demolish those things. And there was no sitting place to be constructed by the people, so that could be demolished as well. And a person could be imprisoned for 5 years on the basis of mere suspicion, and that is under Section 39. So these were some of the features. There are other as well, but these are the main. That's why it's called the Black Law. And in order to exert pressure, there were other instrument of punishment that is called blockade. That was to exert economic pressure by excluding tribes from the markets, land, and grazing in the neighboring district or agency. Then there was Paramta, that was seizure of animals, people, persons, if they had to go to the neighbor. So wherever they go outside of the territory, they could be person, animal, they could be, or their property could be seized. So that was to put pressure on, and that was working. That was the system of administration that was put in place during the British Empire. Pakistan inherited this system of administration, and it was put in place, and it was working until May 20, as late as May 2018. What Pakistan did was then, this political agent system that was there, all these power that I just mentioned, these were there with the political agent. Political agent was the representative of the central government in tribal agencies. So president, so the governor of the province, Northwest Frontier province, to appoint political agent with the consent of the president. So that was the system. So basically, the political agent was the representative of the central government. So the president of Pakistan was responsible for the affairs of the tribal areas before May 2018. So he could issue a decree that this area ceased to be a tribal area, and this is. So that is to be done with the president. And one of my respondents called it presidential dictatorship. That FATA was under presidential dictatorship. Then there was under Article 246. Under Article 247, no act of the parliament was applicable to FATA, although FATA was to send its people, its representative, to the Central National Assembly and Senate, 12 members of the National Assembly and 8 senators, but they could legislate for the whole of Pakistan, but they could not legislate for their own constituencies. And Article 247, they were outside of the judicial structure of Pakistan. So no jurisdiction of the High Court or Supreme Court was extended to the tribal areas. So that was this was the system in place until May 2018. And besides these things, the adult franchise was extended to FATA in 1996, and Political Parties Act. Before that, political parties could not act in FATA, in the federally administered tribal areas, until 2011. So Political Parties Act was extended in 2011. But as we see that these reforms were there, but then other kinds of ordinances and regulations were put in place that effectively stopped all these things from happening, all these reforms from taking shape and have some impact on the ground. So then when the 2011 reforms, when FATA was some action were taken that old people and young kids, they could not be incarcerated, as was the case in the frontier crimes regulation, and that political parties could be extended. Alongside that, another ordinance was implemented that was called Action in Aid of Civil Power. That meant that it was essentially about the extension of the power of the armed forces in the tribal. So it vested enormous powers in the armed forces of Pakistan. It was that there were internment centers were established under this Action in Aid of Civil Power Act, and that was that armed forces could intern any person if his acts were deemed against the integrity, solidarity, and security of the state until the continuation of the Civil Action in Aid Ordinance. As it was an ordinance, so it could be lifted anytime when the government wanted. So it could be, so it was not an act, to clarify, it was an ordinance, and that was there. So, and it also changed the Evidence Act. Now a statement or a deposition by any person of the armed forces or any person authorized by them that could be taken as evidence and could be used to convict a person who is interned. That was, and besides this, and areas were defined that this Action in Aid of Civil Power is now implemented in this defined area. But still, armed forces could intern any person outside of the defined area as well, if they thought that it was harming the integrity of the state. So what that continuation that was happening, and then in May 2018, the state decided that FATA, the federally administered, should be merged with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that was settled district, settled province. So they merged, and first there was another regulation was implemented, interim governance, but that was struck down by the High Court and because that was unconstitutional. And then later onward, that it was the Action in Aid of Civil Power. It was only in the federally administered tribal areas and also provincially administered. Now that act was extended to the whole of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was that included the former tribal areas as well, the federally administered tribal areas. So actually, it is not clear whether FATA, the federally administered, was merged with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was merged with FATA, because this unconstitutional, inhuman Action in Aid of Civil Power, where there is no due process, and it was also deemed unconstitutional by the Peshawar High Court, and it was reinstated by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. So this was the interim course, but that was then what happened was, so the interim, this Action in Aid of Civil Power, it was there, but then there were land disputes and things, and after the merger of FATA with Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, then these land disputes, because it was collective, the property was collective based on Nikat, there were land disputes because the previous system was not there, and the new system was not, judiciary was not there. It is in parts, it is there, but it is not actually there. Police is there, and political agent is not there, and that is replaced by the deputy commissioner, and the police was not there, but now there is police officer there in each tribal district. So this land dispute, now the provincial government has come up with another regulation that is called Alternative Dispute Resolution, that is to be put in place. It is in the process, almost it is done. So what happens is in this that arbitration selection committee or arbitrators selection committees are there, which are manned by commissioner, regional police officer, senior civil judge, regional prosecution, representative of the district prosecution, representative of the special branch, representative of the LES, law enforcement agencies, which means intelligence agencies, and deputy commissioner. And they could co-opt other people, and they would select salis or salisin or arbitrators from the lawyer community, religious scholars, tribal elders, notable tribal elders, and then people have to come up and they have to bring both civil and criminal cases to this committee in the tribal areas, the erstwhile FATA, and that could be extended to the whole of the Pashtun-Pakhtunkhwa, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So this selection committee, they can, it is under the chairmanship of commissioner, and commissioner could convene meetings and things, and they could select these notables and these lawyers and things. But they could be excluded or removed from the committees by simple majority. And it said that Jirga is again, it is given a cover by this, and no appeal could be made against the decision of these arbitration selection committees, or the salisin as they are called. No, and they have perfect indemnity. They could not be taken to the court of law for their decisions, and the cost of bringing issues to the council, that is to be borne by the parties themselves. So now, what is the people are saying that that FATA is what people thought that it could happen, that now FATA was merged with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and all the laws of the state could now extend to FATA as well. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And people are saying that FATA has been converted into a laboratory where all kinds of experiments are made, from judicial system to other systems. Now, in this system, this ADR, the alternative dispute resolution mechanism, there is no separation of power because regional police officer is there, commissioner is there, intelligence agencies are there, and they have to decide. They are not trained for this purpose, but they have to decide the fate of criminal and civil cases. And so there is no, and it has set up like parallel judicial system in the tribal area. The government is saying that it is for quick and easy dispensation of justice. But people are saying that that could be done by increasing the number of judges rather than by bringing these unelected bodies to decide cases between tribes or family, or it is not a thing. So this is all these are these points, all these things, these referred or point to the fact that this FATA or the tribal areas are still considered to be a strategic space where the people are, as in the colonial British time, they were not colonial subjects because there was no law were implemented, or they could not, the laws could not be implemented there in the tribal areas. So they were not colonial but imperial objects that could be disposed of whenever. So that continues until today. That is these the frontier crime regulation that was deemed genocidal, barbaric, by one of the political agents that it was only applicable to the Pashtuns or the Pathans and the Baluch. So it is genocidal and it is barbaric. Why? Same people are treated differently. If they are citizens of the state, then equal citizens of the state, rather than that they should be dealt with differently. And Humaira Iqtidar of the London School of the KCL, she refers to this the apartheid regime as FATA was subjected to a deep-seated racism. So these things are there. Then related to this is the post 9/11 rise of violence and terrorism in the tribe. There are two perspectives on that. One is the state perspective on the rise of violent extremism or terrorism in the tribal areas. They think that the Pashtuns or the tribesmen, they are culturally and politically, they are culturally and genetically, they are prone to violent extremism because they are backward, they are primitive. These are also Pakistani said that they are backward, and Musharraf said, and then another general said that they are culturally and politically extremists. So as they were culturally like that, and they had their code of conduct that's called Pashtunwali, and in Pashtunwali there are three main tenets, that is revenge, that is hospitality, honor, and revenge. What happened according to this logic, that the Taliban, Afghan Taliban, and Al-Qaeda, when they were fleeing after September 9/11, when US started bombarding them, then they came and there is hospitality, so they were culturally bound, the tribes were culturally bound to provide them refuge, because there is hospitality is there, they can't. And then it was dishonor to refuse hospitality to anybody. So it was a hospitality and honor related. Now the government of Musharraf that was under pressure from the US to act against Al-Qaeda because they were creating troubles for the ISAF troops in Afghanistan. Then when military operations was carried out, then it was, that displaced people, then it became a revenge issue. So this Pashtunwali is linked with violent extremism in this sense that they had to provide hospitality, refuge to the fleeing militants, and then it was dishonor if they had not refused. And once the military started carrying out operations, then they were displaced, and it was an honor issue. That's why the whole FATA that became a bad land of Pakistan, or the most dangerous place in the world, as I mentioned in the start. So that is the state's thing, and related to this is that some foreign hostile agencies or hostile agencies like Indian agencies or Afghan national NDS, they are fomenting trouble in Pakistan, and they were doing all these things. And they mentioned the dual doctrine of offensive defense, that if Pakistan do another Mumbai, they would lose Balochistan. And if they don't stop using jihadi militancy as a policy, then the same actors could be used against them. So that is how they say that Pakistani official narrative is that they are the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, that was being used by hostile intelligence agencies to destabilize Pakistan. So that is the state narrative that is being all the literature that is available. That is, you could see that these things are there. But there are problems with this narrative, this perspective, because when you look at the things that it was hospitality, revenge, and orange issue, then 1,400 tribal elders they were killed. Who killed them? If it was a revenge issue, then who were killing these tribal elders who could unite tribesmen against fleeing militants? Because it was difficult for anybody to enter FATA, the tribal agencies, without the consent of those tribal elders, because they were a unifying force. So 1,400 tribal elders were killed. Who were killing them then if it was a revenge? Then millions of people got displaced how millions of people got displaced, and it was people were, if they were to fight, or it was a revenge issue, or it was an honor issue, then all these millions of people, they were to fight the Pakistan army or the any state or non-state actor they were supposed to do. So there is no the state narrative is not an explanatory framework that could explain the violence in the tribal areas. Then there is another perspective that is Ahmad Rashid is of the way that no, there was little, there was some state level involvement in this. He argues that after 9/11, Pakistan had a chance to mainstream the tribal areas, but instead of mainstreaming or bring it to the mainstream, what they did was that they tried to, they have been trying with the aim to use them to harass Kabul or the government in Kabul, and they refused to dig out Al Qaeda, and they allowed Talibanization to happen, to take root in the tribal areas. So and he also says that there was a NGO type organization was put in place to maintain control over the violence that was that was happening in the tribal belt and in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as well. So there was a locus of control according to, and Zahid Hussain is of the view that when there was violence and people were fleeing, and after there was a Miran Shah, there was a dacoit, and he was hanged by the Taliban. There was a lot of fuss there around that thing, and that was media coverage was given, and it was almost the same thing what happened to the commanders, the local warlords in Kandahar, Afghanistan, when Mullah Umar with his 30 Taliban, they came out and killed the warlords and hang them. So that was exactly happening in 2004. So that was the process of Talibanization. And Katie Clark and Adrian, they are of the view, and they have put in the book Deception, that the political agent of North Waziristan Tribal Agency, that was, he pointed out that he was under instruction from the government in Islamabad, means from the state authorities, that he was not to put hurdles in the path of those militants. That's why once they were there, they were stationed there, and they had then slowly, gradually, in 2004 and 5, then they were extending their tentacles to the adjacent tribal areas and to the central districts as well. So that is then it is difficult to sustain in the light of this, then the explanation that people, the tribesmen, they are culturally and religiously, they are vulnerable to extremism or religious extremism. That is not. And when the state is doing all this, then it is like victim blaming the tribesmen. That should not have happened in the first place. And Hussain Haqqani is of the view that Pakistan has its own forward policy with regard to Afghanistan. It wants to have a stable, it wants to have a friendly government in Kabul, so that it doesn't give rise to any problem with Pakistan, and also that it is to be the government in Kabul, because it is like East-West situation that was Germany in 1870, that it could not afford an alliance between Tsarist Russia and France. So it has to play games in order to. So Pakistan is in the same situation that on the east it has India, and on the west it is Afghanistan. If there is Indian influence in Afghanistan, then Pakistan is squeezed between the two. That's why it wants to have a friendly government in Kabul, in Afghanistan. And that is one thing, and that is related to that is then the Durand line issue that is not settled between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Afghanistan states and people, they do not recognize the Durand line, and related to that is the Pashtunistan issue. So that is in order to have a friendly government in Kabul, then that would not give Pakistan that that issue of Pashtunistan would not be there if Pakistan has a friendly government in Kabul. So keeping this broader thing in mind, then it makes sense, because in 2001, the then DG military operation, General Kiani told journalists that Pakistan could not afford a strong Afghan national army and elite with Indian mindset. And then the foreign troops and the U.S. forces, they have brought that into, and Indian influence is there. It is on the rise, and the Afghan National Army is also getting strength by the day. So it would be like a difficult situation in terms of strategic calculation for Pakistan. So they have to act, and that act that could mean to have leverage over the Taliban, and the Taliban, that means that tribal areas has to be a strategic space that could be used for geopolitical machinations, as has been historically has been happening. So concluding this, FATA was a most dangerous place and is still not a less dangerous place. And there was, because it is being used for strategic purposes, I have argued that there was state presence in FATA, and there was authority vacuum that doesn't hold water. And in terms of militancy and violent extremism, there are two perspectives. One is that Pashtuns, the tribesmen, they are culturally and genetically prone to violent extremism. That's why there was violence, and that hostile intelligence agencies, India and Afghanistan, they are fomenting trouble in Pakistan, and that's why they were allying with the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan to foment trouble in Pakistan. But on the other hand, there is a counter perspective. The second perspective is that no, there was a kind of state connivance with the non-state actors to keep FATA in that violent. And there was, as Ahmad Rashid said, that there was a locus of control through a group of retired military officials to have a control over the violence. So if control over violence in the tribal areas meant a control over violence in Afghanistan as well, and they were there to harass Kabul, as Ahmad Rashid argued. So it is a complex phenomenon in terms of administration. It was indirect administration in during the Mughal time, indirect in the British, and it is direct, but is through non-elected bodies. And that in terms of administration, little has changed, and there is little relief for the people of the tribal areas in terms of justice, in terms of fair representation in the provincial and central legislature. So as long as all these issues are not sorted, and people, there will be trouble, and this trouble could be more problematic for the state if the policies of the state continue as they are today. Thank you all.